Welcome to the 10 Figure Podcast, everybody. I want to just welcome everybody and appreciate you guys showing up and taking the time to kind of listen to what we've got planned for you today, which is something that's really exciting, actually, with one of our attorneys locally named Ian Service. He's the head of the Service Law Group out of Chandler, Arizona, and he's going to be bringing a little bit of perspective around basically the criminal industry side of it. They do major felonies and criminal cases. So, one of the things that I wanted to really talk to him about was kind of what he's seen, how their firm has transitioned through the pandemic whenever it comes to felonies, whenever they've had to deal with all of the backlogs in courts and, what they've been able to put in place to even kind of automate some of the processes and procedures to get around some of the pain points that they probably face with the timelines. So, Ian, welcome. Thank you for taking some time to meet with us. I just kind of wanted to kick it off there is like, how is the firm doing making it through the pandemic and kind of going into this new phase where we're at?
So the firm's doing really well. I appreciate having this time to talk to you. It's the first for me. Service Law Group started in 2016. And so we are about 5.5 years in business. I've been practicing for about 15 years, and I spent those first 10 years, give or take, with 3 different counties as a prosecutor for half of that and public defense for about half of that, with Maricopa County a little bit, but 2 counties in Idaho where I started practicing first. And so backing up a little bit, I grew up in Tempe, Arizona, went to NAU for my undergrad, and we went to a law school in Michigan, ended up in Idaho, and practiced there for nearly 10 years before moving back home in 2015, 2016, with the goal of opening up my own practice. And that happened. I realized that, and it's doing great over the last 5.5 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what made you make the transition from being a civil servant to doing it? I know my family, there were senators and attorneys back in Missouri. And that was one of the things is like, they were always had this civil servant mindset they always needed to serve. What made you transition from going to that side to serving more the other side of it?
So for many years, and I loved being a civil servant, especially being a prosecutor. In Idaho, I rose to be number 2 in one of the largest counties there as a chief deputy prosecutor.
Nice.
And that gave me a really width of experience in criminal cases, juvenile cases, mental health cases. And I was in charge of advising the county officials, the sheriff, the elected commissioners of the county, and so forth as their legal counsel.
Interesting.
The problem that I ran into was now I was 5-6 years into my career as a young attorney, and I kind of reached the ceiling of pay wages go. Gotcha. To make any more, it's 1 or 2 raises every other year, right? Yeah. 1%, 2%, 1%. If ever, depending on the budget. And chief deputy is about as high as you can go unless you run for office, unless I ran for an elected official. And then that wage also is set by legislation. That one doesn't raise unless the legislators decide to give themselves a raise. So if I'm an elected official in a large county in Idaho or a small county in Idaho, I've hit my ceiling in less than 7 years of practice. And so the call was, let's move back to Arizona with a sole goal of opening up our own practice, because I got student debt, I got a growing family, and I've always wanted to own my own business. And I went to law school and undergrad thinking, I don't want to work for anybody but myself. I want to own my own business, but I want to be a lawyer. And I realized that after about 10 years of practice and now 5 years successfully as my own practice, my solo practitioner. So that goal realized itself when we finally got back to Arizona, went out on my own and took that risk, took that jump. That's working out great for us.
That's awesome. So when you kind of had made that leap, how did you do that transition? Was it something that you kind of were able to stair step into, or was it, that like, okay, getting with the family and we're going to plan this out and like, we're going to hunker down and get this like knocked out in the next 6 months? Or what was that transition like to you?
So there was some sacrifices made when we moved down here. I was working for Maricopa County in a public defense office. That's still salary wages as a civil servant, with the goal of let's find a way to supplement our income and then turn that over to private practice really quickly. And that was through contracting as independent contractors with any county or city or agency that has criminal defense work or child protection work that they would contract. I applied for that in 4 or 5 months after moving back to Arizona, one with Pinal County, Arizona, which is south of Chandler, in Florence, Arizona. The Superior Court there was putting out a bid process for contractors to take some, both child protection cases by contract firms as well as serious adult felonies. I have that experience. I applied for it. I didn't hear back from them for a number of months. We had to turn this packet in, how you do government bid work. And that packet included hundreds of pages, or whatever it included. I had to drive it over there after work one day to get there on time by 5 o'clock and turned it in by May 1st. And then by mid-October, they finally called me and said, hey, we want you as a contractor, come in and interview with us. I was still working with Maricopa County on a 9-to-5 job. I drove down there and interviewed with them really quickly, and they said, we want to offer you that contract. It can start as soon as November 1st. So within a couple of weeks, I quit my job at the county and was a solo practitioner with a contract, hoping that they would actually give me some clients, right? And they did. 4 or 5 months later, I had a full load and it was hit the ground running with that income, saying, hey, look, this really worked for us.
Gotcha. So what's your goal with the firm? Is it something to be where, we're in the valley, so I always, look at like Rafi or look at Learn and Row, where they're all over the place. Like, is it to be that multi-dynamic firm? Or are you going to stay very disciplined and grow like upwards? What does the outlook look like?
Well, for me, the discipline is going to be very narrow. I am focused on felony litigation, jury trials. That's what I love. That's what I love to do. Okay. It's every day is a crime podcast for me and in my life, right? Awesome. The stories and the people I represent, those kind of things are great. That never gets old, and that never has gotten old in 15 years. But for growing the firm, we have this discussion constantly right now. What kind of advertising needs to go into place to bring in more private clients? And private clients, for somebody accused of felonies, they're usually in jail and going to be there a while. That means their families are supporting them financially, including legal fees and experts and so forth. So that's a different niche, which would take some money to advertise to the Valley, to Pinal County, and to all of Arizona. It might mean bringing on an extra associate and training an associate that's got a few years of experience or less. And maybe they can broaden. I have no interest in doing the family law or divorces. I've been trained on all that, but that's not something that excites me. It's a lot of drama. Over the last 5 years, I've done 27 jury trials. And this goes back to your conversation about the pandemic. How did you do all those jury trials in the last 5 years, 2 of which, the courts were doing very minimal work? Well, my firm is that busy where I've done, and the statistics were this, which we laugh at. New York City did 0 jury trials in 2020. They just shut their courts down completely, and they tried to put up the plexiglass, and they tried to accommodate all these criminals waiting in jail to get their speedy trial rights. And in that same year, I did 4 or 5 jury trials, which means I did 4 or 5 times more than all of New York City, which is kind of fun.
That is pretty funny.
I average 10 or 12 jury trials a year right now, and just having finished one last week. They range from felony drugs all the way up to serious homicides and sex cases and shootings and aggravated assaults.
How are you balancing all that, man? Like, that seems like it's a lot, and even predicting like timelines on some of those would be difficult to fit that.
Yeah, and now we've come out of the pandemic, but as trials go, most felons don't want to run into a jury trial unprepared. So there's a lot of this balance of, hey, this is very serious. We want to make sure we take the 6 months, the year and a half to prepare for this serious trial before we run in there. Because we're up against the state that has a big brand new building and 30 attorneys and just as many staff and all the police officers that they can call upon at any time to firm things up.
Yeah.
How do you go up against that kind of machine is time. Put the time in, you work with the client, you give them expectations. And those expectations are, you got 10 counts. I think I can beat 8 of those 10, but these 2 are serious. And how do we get around that? So we spend a lot of time on the very specifics. And when we try a case, generally I can predict that outcome. I can beat these. This one's going to hurt, because there's no hiding the ball. There's no hidden cards. The state's got to turn over everything. I turn back over everything that I find out. And then we go to the trial and just say, we see it differently, ladies and gentlemen, and you guys get to decide who to believe. And those witnesses come in and tell their story. So right now we're in the pains of, there's a lot of jury trials that still need to be done. I've been kept busy. Rarer are some of those attorneys that also didn't do a lot of jury trials. So I have clients that have been waiting 2 and 3 years, a year and a half, 2 years of that, waiting just to get their trial date because of that backlog. Right now, between now and the end of this year, I have probably 15 jury trials on my calendar. Not all of those are going to go this year because I can't do more than 1 or 2 a month, right? Yeah, that would be ineffective as counsel. Yeah, disservice to my clients. So I'm constantly rotating with these judges saying, hey, judge, I can't be in 2 places at once. Will you continue this? My client's cool with continuing it another month, another 6 months, and so balancing my calendar.
Almost use that kind of scarcity aspect as a value prop in a lot of your cases, because I'm sure as the prosecutors, the longer you draw that out, they're probably more and more to take different decisions and accountabilities and things like that into case.
Yeah, you would think they would be more motivated to give more lenient plea agreements. Hey, we'll get rid of those 2 counts you don't like if you'll take this one or this one. I've had some prosecutors that have been extra lenient through that process of let's eliminate trials because there's enough there to do so. But I still manage with a large enough caseload that I'm in trial once, twice a month pretty easily and consistently, and still playing catch up. That snowball effect that has happened since 2020, 2021, I still have 2 and 3 set on some same calendar weeks. It's obnoxious, but it's starting to sort itself out. I've now set trials as far out as February of next year. Wow. Telling these judges, I can't do 3 in 1 week. Judge, will you set this out? And he'll say, okay, you're by yourself now in February. Don't double book it. I've been double booking for a couple of years to compensate. Keeps me busy, but I'm still one guy doing a lot of trials.
Gotcha. Do you have any ambitions to bring in those associates and things like that, or where does that look like?
So that's a difficult situation where I have the business, but I also need the private business also to increase that private clientele. You see these big advertising firms, the Cantors and Suzuki, and you've named a couple, that you see those billboards, but they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to keep a presence on the road and online and SEO and all that other business. And they have, 10, 12 attorneys because they're taking 70 cases a month or 100 cases a month, and they're collecting these huge fees. What you don't see is those same firms sending those newbie associates to do jury trials. Yeah. Right? I'm outpacing those bigger firms by myself because I have the experience to go try the case and get it done. There's a term that I've always used, and in some firms, and I wouldn't point fingers at any particular, but those larger firms are what they call a bleed 'em and plead 'em. Collect a big retainer, spend a year, spend 2 years till that money runs low, and then it's either set a trial or we got to make a plea agreement to get out of this one. And Arizona courts, in my experience, are allowing these attorneys that have been on a case a year or more, telling the judge, we got to set it for trial, and they've run out of money, so I got to withdraw. And guess who inherits those cases when they withdraw? Because now they're indigent. They're been sitting in jail for a year with a private attorney who took all their money, their family's money. Now I get court appointed to try that case in the next 4 or 5 months. Yeah. That bleed 'em and plead 'em is something I don't want to grow my firm into. I still want to have that personal service when they call me and say, yes, I can do your trial. It'll be me. And I'll be my associate maybe that I've trained, but not that much bigger.
That's admirable. I think that's very admirable. I think most, I've had some experience with attorneys in the past and seen that through, friends and family and things like that, that they have done that bleed it and plead it type thing. And there isn't that clarity in the outcome. And I think it's even more needed whenever they're going through some of these areas like, Maricopa County or, where there are these large, they're machines. Like they are machines that work and are efficient and run. So like you really have to, that's very admirable that you take that much personal care in it. Like, so you said that you grew up around here. How much of that is Midwest stuff from Iowa impacted that kind of, I want to say bleeding heart, but like just the compassion, right, for the criminal industry or criminal side of it?
So I think it's mostly driven by my wife. I've been married 22 years, and she's always said, no matter what side you're on, whether you're prosecuting a criminal or defending them, you got to remember they're not a number, they're people. So she's real good at reminding me of the compassion side of it. Some of these people are great people, but they've made some of the worst decisions any person could make in our society, right? It doesn't define them. That behavior doesn't define them as a person. You know, they might have committed homicide, but they are not serial killer maniacs, right? It's high on methamphetamine. It's a drug deal gone bad. And that's a time in their life, which is the worst period of their life. How do I have compassion for that? Because I sit with these people while they're in jail and say, what's your life been like since the beginning? Right? Oh, you were abused at age 9 and 10 and a foster kid by 11. And you were already stealing cars with a gang at age 11 and getting arrested in stolen cars. Right? I have these great conversations with real people, real humans that have been accused of some of the behaviors that got to that point.
You said something that's interesting earlier that you were talking about before we got on the interview about some of the mental health aspect of things, like how much, like, that's something that I'm close to. Like I've seen, that in family. I've had, at times issues with that myself. Like, so some of the compassionate nature of things is like, how much of the mental health is a part of your job? Like, what do you see from a percentage where it is things where people are just, either hitting a roadblock or there's just a lack of, clarity within themselves of what they should be doing in life or moralities?
So you could break it down a couple ways. There's the mental health aspect. If I run into a client that I really think is struggling for competency, can you understand who I am, what a judge is, why you're here today in jail, right? There's a process for that, for me to step back and tell the judge they need an evaluation to come through competency first. And then I can step back, wait a couple of weeks for the pros to step in, make some reports, make some medication, some things. And then I can step back in and say, welcome back. I'm glad you're medicated. Let's work on the criminal behavior part of it, because now they understand the process. They've been restored to competency. It's a small percentage where I have people that are incompetent completely, where they just have a mind of an 8-year-old and they never will get it as an adult for whatever reason. That's very rare. But I do have a lot of clients with mental health, mental trauma, from childhood trauma, adult trauma. They've seen things that no human should ever see as young people. And it tends to be exacerbated by drug use. Fentanyl is horrible right now. Heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines. And when they get caught in this cycle of, I want to do so many drugs because I can't stand my childhood, then they get arrested, they're in jail. I can't talk to them for about a week or two until they do that nasty detox. Yeah. I've met clients that are on fentanyl that are just screaming and belligerent and telling the judge all sorts of things that you shouldn't say in front of a judge. Give them a couple of weeks to dry out and they're as cool as can be. I don't remember that. I'm sorry for my behavior. Where am I at?
Is the system sensitive to that side of it?
It tends to be very governmental when it comes to sensitivity, which means as good as the government work can be, right? There are professionals, there are mental providers, but when somebody's in jail, they're getting the bare minimum, the cheapest. That, if there was drug treatment with mental health components together, that'd be great. But it tends to be these private drug screeners and these private mental health providers, and they don't like to share. You get what you get with government work. If you had a lot of money, you could get all that in our system. That's the United States. But if you rely on the government to pay for it, you're going to get the bare minimum.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something that I've seen transition. I think, oddly enough, like I'm from Missouri originally, and I think that out here on the West Coast, it's much more observant of those type of things and than it is back home. Like, and wondered how that kind of transitioned. Like, so
it's that age old as the taxpayers got to pay for it. And so when somebody's running for office, do you really want to vote for somebody that's going to spend all your tax dollars on somebody that does a lot of drugs or has mental problems? That's the first thing to cut. Let's focus more on roads and education and our kids. That's easier to stump on as a politician. But these bigger systems like Maricopa County and Phoenix, they have a lot more funds. And so you can see that is very helpful for the criminals that I able to engage in those services early and often. Some of the outlying counties, not so much. They struggle for providers because, a high-priced doctor doesn't want to live in Gila County.
Yeah.
Except for a second home in Payson.
Any of the res stuff that goes on, right?
Oh, man.
Nobody wants to be out there and it's...
Yeah, true socialism out on the res. You just get the bare minimum and you stand in a bread line for health services, for drug services, and so forth. So there are some tribes that have some great native services and free and available, but some of the more rural ones really leave them hanging.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So let me ask you something. I mentioned this before we started talking, was about kind of the firm growth. And one of the trends that I saw in the addiction field, and I've kind of seen it start trickling into the legal field. And I wondered if that, and it's about kind of some of the VCs and some of these larger funds, or even some of the insurance companies that are getting involved within these firms since the changing of the law, that you no longer have to be an attorney to sit on a board of a firm, basically, right? Or a bar certified. So is that something that you're seeing trickle into the criminal side as well, or?
Not so much yet. The criminal side is so much more specialized. How does a non-attorney even get his foot in there? Would I ever bring on somebody that was a non-attorney as a partner, a silent partner or whatnot? How would I incorporate them when fully my 40-hour week or more is solely on clients and going to court? I spend a lot of time at the courthouse. It may happen more so in what I would consider big law, where those large law firms that have 60 to 300 lawyers and they're doing corporations and taxes and, property disputes and building condos or whatever it may be. They might bring in some of those investors and non-attorneys to help manage that caseload, that work, and bring in the work too. As advertising goes, you can bring in marketing people in-house and be partners and be on the board because you don't have to be an attorney. But the law still requires an attorney to pass the bar to go to court. So there's going to always be that law school and that attorney that's passed the bar to take those cases to that court when it becomes an argument there. But those larger big law firms with lots of attorneys and associates might save a lot of money by bringing in non-attorneys that can still specialize in marketing, bringing in communications, press releases, and offer different services that don't have to be attorney related. We're very specifically trained. I'm not trained in marketing. I'm not trained in doing my own taxes, right? I got to hire a CPA. I got to hire a tax attorney because I went to law school because my math is not that good.
Yeah. No, I'm calculating. So I'm the same way. I'm the same way. That's interesting though, that it goes, because as I understand it, in my limited exposure, even to how the legal system in the UK is the trial attorneys is a very, very specialized individual. And I didn't realize it was that specialized here in the United States.
Yeah. That's the great thing about our education in the United States is you can go get that 3-year law degree and then decide what you want to do with it. And it's really wide. I decided that I love what I love and I'm staying in my lane. And I'm very strict about not going out of my lane. I get lots of calls from family, friends, and so forth. Can you represent me in a divorce? No. That's out of my lane. Let me get you somebody that I know. But you're right. England, UK, they have solicitors and barristers. It's very specific who crosses the bar to the judges and who stays home and does the paperwork. Yeah. I'm the guy that likes to go to court and I hate the paperwork, right? I do everything electronically because I hate paper so much.
That's interesting. So have you, from the technology standpoint, has that always been a part of your firm and doing that? Or is that pretty recent since the pandemic or going into it?
It's always been on my mind to be cutting edge for technology in my firm because, it used to be you had to build a file of 500 pages or more with all the pictures and everything else. And it's hard to store all that when you have 100 clients and 300 a year. Banker boxes just build up overnight of these large cases. When I went electronic and I got the iPad and I used Dropbox and I use all these online clouds to manage that system, not only is it easier, I have access to the audio and the video and everything with me at all times on this simple little device. When I talk to my clients, when I'm at court, a lot of firms are struggling to make that transition to get away from paper. So I inherited a case from that guy that had it for a year and he gives me a big fat file. I spent all morning today on my scanner, putting it in my scanner so I can have it right now. I'm still labeling it right here.
Yeah, that's funny.
Because that prior attorney had that big file handed to me like, when are you going to switch over and do this all digital? The good news is the prosecutors, Maricopa County, Pinal County, they're starting to disclose things electronically. by email through their servers, which is, hey, Ian, here's some disclosure for Mr. Rivers. And it's 500 pages, but you don't have to print a dang thing out. I download it straight to my Dropbox account and I can read it right on my device, and no more of that paper that I have to shred later on. It's amazing that the state is doing better than a lot of private firms in technology. Some of these.
How does that transfer of information in that process, how is that compared to like the healthcare stuff with some of the regulations? I know with our one of our platforms we have like HIPAA compliance packages in it, right?
Yeah.
How is that within the legal realm of it?
For the criminal industry, not as strict as like HIPAA, where I have to send it encrypted 15 ways. We can exchange, me and the prosecutor, 99% of stuff. And once in a while, there's, hey, this is medical documents, say an injury at a hospital, a guy got stabbed or shot. Yeah. To transfer that over, it's going to be on a server that is encrypted, slightly different. My child protection cases, because I have a handful of those right now too. Okay. Because we're talking about kids and their hospital records and so forth, that comes over HIPAA protected. But because of technology, the state is very sensitive to follow the law, not to violate HIPAA. Here's some stuff we've gathered from the hospital, and we got to send it to the attorney who's entitled to it, but we need to do so in a fashion where it doesn't make it public, doesn't make it break into. But I don't run into the HIPAA. I imagine there's attorneys that do nothing but medical malpractice, and that HIPAA thing is probably something hard to get around constantly through electronics. But
yeah, well, we've talked to some of the tort attorneys, and with that stuff that they go through, like with the Boy Scout cases that they were going through, and like even there's one that starts with an R that, like, I was like, that's some personal stuff.
Right. You get minors, medical, any of those things that are non-public, and you got to worry about that. Most of my stuff, I get police reports, and they're generally public information. Once the charge has been made and somebody's been indicted with a serious felony, any guy from the newspaper could go over to the clerk of the court and say, give me the police reports. They're public knowledge now. They get redacted versions that'll take out addresses of victims and so forth, right? They'll get the blacked out versions, but I get the non-redacted ones through the state directly, and I can avoid the public aspect. So I get the raw data, the stuff that you won't see on 2020 that the press gets, but the stuff that I've done these cases that are on 2020, and I know all the pictures and I know all the audio and I've seen all the video, and then 2020 shows about one fraction of it because that's all they have.
So did you come to like all the evolution of this is just from a trial and error thing within the technology and movement of things, or did you have kind of a template that you used as a prosecutor?
So trial and error, but I've been lucky where I observe attorneys that I want to pattern myself after, right? Who's good at technology is first. Right out of law school, I worked for the federal district court in Boise, Idaho, and the federal judge there, he was amazing. He did everything electronic because the federal courts had everything scanned at the clerk's office, and then they were uploaded to the system called Pacer. So you can see the plaintiff's filings, you can see the respondent's filings, you can see the case law, you can see this all electronic. So I had this laptop and 2 other monitors, and I never had to use paper right out of law school. I thought it was amazing.
Nice.
And then I go to the county level, and I'm like, oh, what is this? This is all this paperwork I got to deal with and carry big, heavy files. I used to go to court with like 30 files and 2 briefcases, carrying 2 bags because I had so many files to carry with me to court for that day. And that sucked. So I've been always looking out. When I found the iPad Pro and the little Apple Pencil that goes with it, it's my new notepad. Everything's written on it. I have the apps and the software and everything that tracks hours, that tracks my billing, that tracks my notes. And I have all my evidence on there. Every time I have my desk out, it's my iPad. Every time I go to court, it's on the pulpit, right?
Gotcha,
I do jury trials from my iPad. I can put pictures up on the big screen for the jury from my iPad wirelessly, and I blow them away. But it's been 5 years of getting really good at it.
Yeah.
I had a judge just a couple months ago say, hey, Ian, I know you bring your iPad. It's been a couple years. He was in charge of buying all the judges' devices, and he wanted to find the right device. And he brought me into his chambers and said, show me your device, because I know you're the guy when it's technology. And I gave him the what's up about, you got to buy this, you got to use this app, you got to do this for and he moved that way. He's got an iPad at his bench now. And the other attorneys or the other judges now are getting that equipment based on what I told him was the right way to go and based on my 5 years of figuring it out.
That's cool.
And I would never go back to anything else.
So do you still use Pacer?
So Pacer's all the federal filings. If I have federal cases, then I'd have to log into Pacer and I could see all the filings there.
Okay.
I do very few federal cases, so I haven't been on Pacer for a number of months. But it's still a good system.
Specific to the federal stuff then.
Yeah, the federal's done that. Then each county and each city, they're up to what software should they use? How should they comply? And some get it wrong because it's the lowest bidder, and some get it right because it's the lowest bidder. Who knows?
What makes something for you to look for? What features do you look for as an attorney?
Ease of use. Something I can just turn around and show my client, here's the police report, or here's your video of you shooting at that guy. Right? Anything that I can convey to my client just by just turning it around. I can find it through Dropbox. It's really easily filed. I spend a lot of time organizing my files electronically. I can find it in a heartbeat. I know my client. I know where that is, and I can show it to him. That communication's key. If I had to flip through hundreds of pages of paper just to find a report that says it is methamphetamines, according to the lab, that could take me way too long, and it looks terrible with an attorney flipping 15 pages, 100 pages deep to find one lab report to confirm it is methamphetamines.
Do you use the technology piece in like the management of the firm as well and client relationships, or is that mostly just on the case side?
So just in the last, with the pandemic, I did a lot more video consultations with clients because they're more leery. We got to wear masks out in public. So I would send them a Zoom invitation. Zoom has been great. The courts went to a Zoom too. Some of my child protection hearings are still doing WebEx or Zoom appearances where I put on a necktie and I'm still wearing shorts. But I'm appearing for court on my client. My client's also logged in. We could all hear each other and take turns going through those child protection cases. Just in the last month, they've kind of backed away from that to bring in, when there is an actual trial with actual witnesses, we're going to do that in person. But the rest of those can still be by WebEx or Zoom, which is amazing. I can save myself a 40-minute drive to Pinal County for a 10-minute hearing because I can appear with my fake necktie.
That's interesting. So we, one of the first episodes we did for the podcast, we interviewed a guy, his name's Nashid, he's from Stanford, and there's a bunch of really, really just smart dudes that they're teachers that they got stuck in where they were doing a lot of the Zoom stuff. And I think that his technology will probably, it's like some of the stuff you see on like a CSI or something like that from like the jury selecting.
Oh yeah.
Because it does AI mapping of the entire conversations and people that are engaged on whether or not their tone inflections change, like what they keyed in on. It was really, really neat. I think that we'll see a lot more of state organizations and just things like that get more comfortable with the Zoom meetings and being able to track and inform them.
And how more likely are you to attend a jury trial that might be 3 weeks of your time for a personal injury case or, something to that effect where you can appear every morning by Zoom and stay engaged? Yeah. The criminal system is going to be slower, if ever, because I always think of like President Lincoln. He was trying cases 200 years ago as an attorney on the circuit, and they would just show up to town, the judge and two attorneys, and the judge would say, you're the prosecutor today and you're the defense attorney today. Go find your witnesses. We're going to try this case tomorrow, right, in the small town. Yeah. They didn't have video. They didn't have anything but in-person interviews. And then they called a jury of 12 people and sat them down right from that small town, and they started putting on their witnesses. What happened? What'd you see? Where'd that go? I try to try cases more organically like that. And that's how I tell my clients. If there's no video, we're back to Abraham Lincoln time, right? If there's no audio, we're back to Abraham Lincoln time, and your rights still apply. The state still has to prove the case against you. Just because I have fancy technology and I'm better at the prosecutor than the technology doesn't generally win the day or win cases. What does win cases is facts and good witnesses and the evidence right there in person where a jury in person can decide. I still struggle when it comes to a contested hearing. What if you're the guy I got to cross-examine and I want to get you fired up and start swearing and the jury hates you? It's hard to do on video because all they could do is mute you, right? They could go off screen and swear a little bit and come back on. I like that one-on-one confrontation. The right to confront your accuser is tough to do, even through technology. Even if I have some algorithm that's telling me you're full of it and your heart rate's going up and your face says you're lying, does that help the defense attorney or the prosecutor, or is it even Steven, or who has the most money to buy Stanford's technology, which sounds amazing? But in the criminal realm, I might not see that for a number of years still, but I'll certainly look at it for sure.
I think you're right there though. Like because before we started doing marketing and like that, I was in sales and I always adhered to like the NLP stuff and the body language, and I think you lose so much in conversation and impact of what your intent is in words if you aren't there in person, or they can't see those body cues, right? Or see what happens to what you're talking about, like the person you're trying to go after, like whenever he doesn't make those body movements and pissed off like that he would normally make right there in the courtroom, right? So it's very interesting. You have that kind of dichotomy. I think I'm with you there on that. I think it'll be a while before criminal. And I think in some cases though, you want to have like the victim to start crying in some aspect. Right? Like they want those cues to happen.
Right. And it's tough to manufacture just through electronics, even sensitive subjects. So that might be slow to come around for the criminal matters. I would love it to come for the civil stuff. For example, I got court appointed to do a mediation for a personal injury case a couple months ago. Because I'm a member of the Arizona Bar, it's like jury duty. I get selected to take a case.
Is your pro bono hours?
Right. Here's my pro bono. By the way, we just voluntold you to do this. So I did a Zoom hearing with two attorneys, one from the insurance company, one from the plaintiff, and we did a full trial on the Zoom, right? And I'm listening to their evidence and their witnesses calling, and eventually I type up who won and send it into the courts. But that saved a bunch of time. None of us had to travel. None of us had to be at a courthouse. I'm not a judge, right? That saved even more time. Appoint some attorney on his pro bono hours to do it.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm all for that, right? Because a rear-ending under $50,000 dispute doesn't require 12 jurors to come in person to do that kind of stuff.
The cost of the offset the return, right?
Economically speaking, it could be cost saving and less disastrous. I can't imagine a small county having to put on a 8-week trial, and the cost that could be, not only bringing the juries in every day and making them feed lunch and so forth, but the amount of attorneys in the room and the judges, those wages. I always look around the room and say, how many people are on the clock right now? And they're all billing $400, $500, $600 an hour. And they're sitting there waiting their turn for a 10-minute hearing.
Yeah. And they're going to bill for an hour.
They're going to bill the drive there and the drive home as well. So
exactly. Turns into a $3 billable, and it's like, we could have handled this in the office and probably done 3 or 4 more at a time.
Right. It's a 10-minute hearing and it costs them $1,800. That client's going to be thinking, what happened?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I think I'm with you on that. The criminal side, I don't think I've ever looked at it as being so specialized, because I've never been part of a jury trial, I guess. Just seen them on TV, but it is one of those things that you really want to select who you're going to get up there, and just like as much you hear this in some of the commercials. There's one of the groups out here that's like, we go to trial, right? Like, you know what I'm probably talking about. Like, they're not like most attorneys. And that's a very, very good point, is because most people, just getting on here and having done this interview with me, like, there's some attorneys that aren't even comfortable doing that, let alone being in front of a jury and convey confidence and a point. So it's very cool that you're doing that. But
well, and speaking of trials, especially in the criminal world, Pinal County or Maricopa County, they are under 2% of those accused ever in the felony world going to trial. You can have 12,000 people accused a year in Maricopa County, and they're only doing 700-800 trials a year, right? That's a very small percentage. Pinal County is just under 2% as well. And I carry a good caseload of maybe 200 or 300 a year, and I'm going to trial 10, 12 times. My number is about 2.5% of my own clients are going to trial. So I could be that guy on the commercial. I go to trial. Mm-hmm. But still, can you imagine if 10% went to trial, what that would do to the system, or 50% went to trial, what that would do to the system? It would be absolutely crippling. Yeah. Keeping it under 2% still has the snowball effect of sometimes it takes a year or 2 or 3 or longer to get to a felony jury trial because the system can't handle that kind of impact. And that's less than 2% of all people ever accused of a felony going to see a jury trial.
That's wild.
That means there's lots of room for me to negotiate and resolve and make that number right for somebody that is going to, most of my clients are cool enough to say, I messed up. I can take credit for this, but what's the pain look like? How long am I going to be sitting in prison? You know, they might have had priors, and that's a big deal in Arizona, prior felony convictions, and they failed on probation previously. So they're not going to be eligible for a probation plea every time.
Yeah.
They've proven to the government they're just not good and supervisable in the community. So now it's negotiating. At trial, they might look at 15, 20 years if they're convicted on any of the counts. Plea agreement can look at 3, 5, whatever, a percentage of time by resolving it. And that's what I focus on as well. Yes, I go to a lot of trials, but I resolve lots by settlement conference and negotiating with the state. And my reputation with each of these prosecutors, I'm on a first name basis with everybody in the building, you know, the security guards, the prosecutors, the judges, because they know that I'm there to resolve cases the best way I know how and telling my clients real expectations. You probably don't want to go to trial. Trial looks like, I did one yesterday, a settlement conference. The best he could do if he was convicted at trial was 27 years. The worst he could do is 100 years. So somewhere in there, the judge has got to pick between 27 and 100 years, and he's a 40-year-old guy, right?
Yeah.
It's his third DUI in about 3 years. He hit somebody on the back of a motorcycle. There's injuries involved. His expectation of probation is going to be off the charts. You're not going to get probation. Nobody's going to supervise you because you're drinking and driving. That's a guided missile going to kill somebody. 27 years, the best you can do, versus what his plea agreement is, hopefully around 5 years, plus maybe a probation tail for some treatment. There's that treatment component. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he deserves some treatment because the government's failed on getting him into some treatment and get him clean and sober. And that's why he can continue to repeat.
Yeah.
Putting him in jail doesn't treat. Prison doesn't treat. You got to do some treatment programs to give them those abilities to have sobriety, clean and sober.
Gotcha. That's cool. Well, it's good to hear that that they go that route sometimes, and that they're not trying to ram everybody into trials or things like that they're amenable to it. Because I think that, like I said,
you need to. It would cripple the system if you didn't have that ability to negotiate.
It's interesting from that financial impact aspect of it, because I haven't ever really thought about it's so costly, because you're talking about you're employing 15 to 18 people, to even do one trial from that, and then
my jury started about 50 people right now for 14 to be sat. That's 12 plus 2 alternates. Oh, damn, 50 people got to spend half a day of their life to decide if they're going to spend the next 3 to 9 days on a jury. Yeah,
that's crazy. That's wild.
Well, and the COVID in 2020, the reason we didn't do a lot of jury trials was that, they send out the postcards, you've been invited to jury trial. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that people were saying was, I'm not going to go do jury trials because I'm afraid of the exposure for COVID, back when we were real paranoid. And so they were getting less than 1% of those postcards back. You send out 1,000, you only get 10 back. That's not going to fill up one jury trial.
Yeah.
And so they put a pause on jury trials for 6-7 months until the responses started coming back of, are you comfortable coming in and doing a trial in a mask or behind plexiglass? They upped their game a little bit to invite these people in happily, because you get a bunch of retirees, mostly they'll do jury trial because they got spare time. A 65-year-old lady that might have health issues might not want to be in a public space right now with the pandemic going on. So we had a real problem getting a lot of jurors in.
What do you think about, this is a little bit of off the wall question, but what do you think about what's going to impact the criminal system whenever the moratoriums go out and all the stuff that's supposed to happen towards the end of the year, with a lot of that stuff? Do you think you're going to see an influx of criminal cases in that from some of that stuff?
But there's one thing about this industry. It's always the opposite of what a recession does. Our economy heading into this recession and these policies going into play. For me, I think I'm in a recession-proof kind of business, because when the economy goes bad, crime goes up. Yeah. Exactly. Right? Yeah. When borders aren't protected, crime goes up. The policies affect my business opposite of what most people will think. Right? Mm-hmm. Domestic violence goes up, drinking goes up, drug use goes up when the economy is bad and people are laid off. We see a little bit in COVID, we have a lot of people working from home or getting checks from the government. But when those things end and they got to go out and make ends meet, and now inflation's off the chart and gas is at $6 a gallon, I'm going to see a lot more gas stations knocked off, right? I'm going to see
that start kicking.
a lot of more shootings and robberies and things like that, because people are now hustling differently. And that's a commentary, but that fluctuates through the centuries. However, the economy's good. You get the Wild West in the 1800s because the economy was so weird, and you got a good, solid economy. Crime actually comes down in a good economy, which is weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but again, it's one of those things that they talk about. Booze, drugs, and sex. Like in a poor economy, they're best businesses to be in. They say, right? And
yeah, right next to insurance.
Those contribute to lawlessness typically.
Right. They contribute to most of the poor choices my clients make. And I tell them that, you're a good person, but you've made some poor choices. These aren't mistakes. You didn't just slip and fall and pull that trigger. It was a series of using meth for a couple of weeks, getting in a fight with your girl and coming by with your gun. It's a series of poor choices over time that is that snowball effect. You didn't wake up one morning and choose violence. That's rare. You woke up one morning and decided your life's no good, so you started drinking marijuana and then the methamphetamine, and then you had to use fentanyl because it's cheaper. And pretty soon you're such a raging disaster, violence happens. You get punching windows in cars and things like that.
Yeah, it is that snowball strain. So hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully we can maintain some semblance of normalcy when all this comes out. But, well, let me ask you, Ian, like, what could we help you like promote from within your firm? Is this something where you want to grow and you want to take on clients, or is this something where right now you don't have any issue? Like, is there anything that you want to kind of get out to the audience and tell, like, hey, we have this coming up that we're excited about, whether it be charity, whether it be the firm, anything along those lines?
So, and I appreciate that. And right now I'm in that transition of, I rely fairly heavily on my contracts with counties for that felony work. With my bread and butter, I would love to get out to the audiences. You don't need to hire the most expensive firm, the first one in the phone book, the first one to top of Google. You need to find the one with a reputation that is competent. He knows the courts. He's done a lot of jury trials, or she's done a lot of jury trials. Find somebody that is loving what they do and they stay in their lane too. Somebody that says, I do divorces and criminal cases and taxes. Mm-hmm. That means they're spread thin. You don't want to be a jack of all trades, because then you're a master of nothing.
Yeah.
Get out to your audiences. I'm the master at criminal cases. I don't even take misdemeanors very often. I like felony level. So put out there that it doesn't cost as much as you think to get a good felony attorney that's willing to negotiate appropriately. And if trial happens, you're going to have a guy on your side that's the best advocate in the building. Just mopping the floor with those prosecutors that are fresh out of law school, and even those that are seasoned, because nobody does 27 jury trials in 5 years unless they're really staying in their lane.
Yeah.
So, for under $10,000 for your first felony is not uncommon.
I think, honestly, I think that's a huge, value prop. I've seen that happen with, even attorneys that I've considered friends that I've seen to do other things. And it's like that pump and dump kind of thing, right? It's like, give us this money.
Pump and dump.
Well, I'm not going to go to that route because that's going to be another 6 months and I'm not really willing to go there. Right. Like, I think there's a big difference between what you're talking about being a trial attorney and doing it, as opposed to some attorneys that don't have that goodwill or nature. And they go to trial just to drag out the money because they think they hit a golden goose.
Right. And I'm not for the golden goose. I'm for the little guy that has good family support, that's made some poor choices. And there's a resolution to that. It doesn't have to bleed the family dry. It doesn't have to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that bleed them and plead them is shameful sometimes. How do you talk somebody into $10, $12, $20,000 for their very first misdemeanor DUI? I can't comprehend that cash. Just making a mess of our system and making attorneys look like a greedy industry. Yeah. It's the same as a mechanic. You got the guy that works out of his own garage and put your brake pads on for a couple $100, or you can take it to one of these large, big outfits that have multiple places on every corner, and it's going to be $1,200 just for the diagnosis, and they're going to tell you need $5,000 worth of work because they found everything in their diagnosis, and all you wanted was brake pads. Get the guy that knows it's brake pads. I'll put them on. Here's my hourly, and we're done.
Yeah. Well, like I said, right? I like the clarity and the transparency and in our conversations that it seems like you have with your clients.
And that's the conversation. I want to be straight up that their expectations are here. When I collect a retainer, I do it by flat fee. No more, no less. I'm not billing them for every copy that I have to make or the mail that I have to send to the jail. It is, your family gave me this amount, whether we go to trial or not. Mm-hmm. That's what you get. You know what you get expectation-wise. And then I can tell them from my experience, by the way, you're looking at maybe probation, this many years in jail, this many years in prison, or a combination, but I'm going to make it happen. So I'm managing expectations. No matter how much I'm paid, I treat the guy that the court appoints me as the guy that gave me $10,000 the same. Mm-hmm. Even the guy that gave me more than that, he gets the same treatment from my firm as the guy that is poor and has no family and the court appointed him to me. So
that's cool.
When it comes to the service part of it, I treat you the same no matter how much they pay. And I had to withdraw from a number of clients who were like, hey, if I just threw you more money, you can make this go away. And I said, that's not how we work. Money won't buy you out of this bad problem. And I said, just don't insult me with that again.
Yeah.
Right? I'll treat you the same way I treat all my clients, whether you're a millionaire or you're the poorest guy off the street. And I ended up withdrawing from that particular client, and he went and hired a big law firm, and they bled him and pled him, and he's doing 10 years in prison right now. When he could have stayed with me as court appointed, but he thought money would fix his problems.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, like I said, that's extremely admirable. And I think it's a point that, I'm going to clip up for you, because I think that's something that people need to have in mindset whenever they talk about that, because that continuation, like that unpredictability sometime within the system, with a pandemic, within this, like, especially during a pandemic, there's probably a lot of disappointing for those bleed them and plead them deals.
Yeah. You can get tired of sitting around for your private attorney to come visit you. I've inherited so many cases that are a year old and they've never seen their attorney.
Well, I got to ask you something. My final question here is, from the name Service. Like, I love when I saw that like your email, and can I give your email?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like,
do it.
Serve at Service Law Group, or Serve Law. It's Service Law Group, right? Not Services.
Yeah. That's my true last name. I've grown up with it, several generations of it. So I made it my law firm, Service Law. My license plate, Serve Law, right?
That's awesome.
That's easy for me to find. My first name's Ian, but last name's Service, just like a gas station.
Well, it literally makes it like the Lincoln lawyer just comes to mind whenever I think of you now.
I appreciate that comparison. That's me. I'll drive to the courthouse listening to tapes while I'm, the jail calls.
That's what I'm picturing. Like and I saw it because I saw iService. I was like, your email. I was like looking at it. I was like, oh, that's like an intake email. And then I was like, no, it's not. That's his name. I was like, that's awesome.
That's my name. And I'm answering those emails constantly from people. So, if your podcast has that reach and they want to email me, happily to talk to them. We'll do a Zoom meeting. We'll do a consult. I have an office. I do office sharing with a big bunch of firms. They're mostly realtors in Chandler, and I work out of my home office today. But most of my suit and tie work is at the courthout. But I'll be happy to meet clients anywhere.
I appreciate that. I think I'm gonna label this the Phoenix's Lincoln lawyer.
I'd appreciate it.
But because, like I said, I think I appreciate what you're doing for, the criminal system. And I appreciate, I think that the mental health is something that I see, people that are sensitive to that and people that kind of can help in that process. I think that's a severely underserved part of our criminal system. So I can definitely appreciate that. And I appreciate you spending the time with us. And like I said, I'm going to cut you up some videos of this, and we'll basically get this published out. And anybody that wants to reach out, like I said, you can go to servicelawgroup.com to check out. It's iService. And, he's here in the Phoenix Valley. And what areas do you serve last and foremost before we cut?
So I make my office in South Chandler. I'm south of the 202 near Arizona Avenue. I serve all of Pinal County, which is Maricopa and Casa Grande and Florence, Apache Junction, but I also get the East Valley. I'm an East Valley guy. I grew up in Tempe, Mesa, Gilbert,
Gotcha.
Chandler, right? I like this side. I try to avoid anything on the other side of the airport. If you are on that side of the airport, we'll find you somebody over there.
Okay.
I'm well connected, attorney friends that practice in that side of the state, this side of the state, and we'll find you the right person.
Cool. So if you're getting any trouble, felony, misdemeanor, especially the major felonies, you think you might be going to court and need an expert, Call Service Law
Yeah.
Group.
Don't go it alone. Yeah. Don't represent yourself. There are some great public defenders that can help you. There are some public defenders that are overwhelmed or undereducated. So come with somebody with experience, and that's what I got.
Well, I definitely appreciate the time, Ian, and you spend the time with me. And good luck with all your aspirations, with Service Law Group. And like I said, keep this mindset going forward, because I think that is it's a very moral high ground. And I'm glad you're on it.
I appreciate you